In this video, you're going to hear my answers to the 15 most frequently asked questions about using Ableton Live in worship. My name is Jake Goslin with Churchfront.com, an online resource for innovative and creative church leaders. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell to receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and your church. I recently asked the Churchfront community what questions they have about using Ableton Live in worship. Here are the 15 most frequently asked questions out of the hundreds I received, along with my answers to those questions. Before you continue in this video, let me know in the comments what questions you have about using Ableton Live in worship. Chances are, if you keep watching, they will be answered. But I love hearing from you, and maybe you'll ask a question that isn't covered here. In that case, I'll do my best to respond to your comment ASAP. Here are the 15 most frequently asked questions about using Ableton Live in worship. Number 1, how do I get started with Ableton on a budget and not spend a bunch of money on tracks? A lot of people assume they need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to get started using Ableton Live and backing tracks. If you are on a super tight budget, but you want to start using the full capability of Ableton Live, here's what I recommend. Purchase the intro version of Ableton Live for $99 and purchase band cues from loopcommunity.com for $5. Then download free worship pads at churchfrontpads.com, link below. Using Ableton's internal click, the band cues from Loop Community, and free pads from Churchfront, you can get up and running with Ableton Live for $104. And better yet, before you even purchase Ableton Live, you can download their 30-day free trial so you get to learn it before you actually have to buy it. Number 2, how do I control ProPresenter and lighting with Ableton Live? You can control ProPresenter and lighting software with Ableton Live by sending MIDI cues over Wi-Fi. Since you are playing with a click track, your timing is always consistent as you play with Ableton Live. Therefore, you can create MIDI cues at certain times in a song or set list to trigger actions in other production software. For example, at the start of the worship service I lead, when I press play for the first song in Ableton using my foot controller, it immediately sends cues to ProPresenter to clear out the pre-service countdown video and music, and it triggers the first slide of the first song. At the same time, it also triggers my DMX 3.0 to change the house lights to a dim scene for worship, and it turns on whatever stage lights I want. All this happens precisely at the right moment, so our slide changes and lighting cues are always perfectly timed. It sounds pretty complicated, but you can quickly learn how to do this in my upcoming training. Number 3, how do I control Ableton during worship services? There are a few ways to control Ableton. First, you can control it directly from the laptop running the software. You can easily add keyboard commands to trigger different songs. For example, I would assign numbers 1 through 5 to the 5 songs on our worship set list. Since it's hard for a worship leader to control a laptop in the service, I would recommend having your drummer or keyboardist trigger the key commands on your computer. Another way to control Ableton is by using a MIDI foot controller. I recommend Looptimus by loopcommunity.com. As a worship leader, I use Looptimus to control Ableton with my feet. Number 4, is it better to use Session View or Arrangement View? I highly recommend using Arrangement View. In my opinion, it's way more flexible for creating transitions, programming flexibility into your set, and creating production automation cues. Number 5, how do I create smooth transitions? Ableton Live Arrangement View gives you the ultimate flexibility to crossfade songs. Sometimes I'll create quick transitions that are seamless, but sometimes I like to add a bit more space between songs, and I'll throw a pad sound between them if they are in the same key. Number 6, how much does prep time take? Prep time varies for everyone. When I'm building a new song library in a new worship ministry, it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a week. There is a lot of grunt work to get done when you add a new song to your Ableton library, but once your list of Ableton songs is built up and you're not creating 5 new song sessions a week, then the weekly work becomes just dragging and dropping them into a set list. That usually takes me an hour or less. Learning Ableton is like learning a new language. The more you practice and put up with the initial learning curve, the more fluent you become. Number 7, how do you build in flexibility for spontaneous worship? Ableton makes it easy to program flexibility into your worship set for spontaneous moments. At the end of songs, you can use MIDI cues to trigger a looping pad to keep playing in case if you want to pray or repeat a part of the song. I do this a lot. With a powerful foot controller like Looptimus, you can assign different sections of the song to different buttons on your controller. When you queue up a section, Ableton will wait to complete the measure sure it's currently on before switching to the section you trigger. This is a bit of an art form in itself, but it is possible. If you constantly want to change up the arrangement order of your songs during a worship set, it honestly may be too cumbersome to program into Ableton. Personally, I like having just a pad and click playing at the end of my songs to give my band that flexibility to repeat things. Number 8, what version of Ableton should I buy? If you are on a tight budget, purchase the intro version of Ableton Live. If your church has the money, buy the standard version. Number 9, how hard is it to learn? I was super intimidated and frustrated with Ableton when I first started to learn it. There are a bunch of tutorials online, but none of them did a great job taking me by the hand step by step to prepare Ableton sets for worship. If I'm teaching you, Ableton Live only takes a few hours to learn and a few days to become an expert. If you try to teach yourself with YouTube videos, it's going to take a long time. Number 10, how do you convince a worship team to use a click and tracks? First, you need to know the software and equipment to get this all functioning properly. Your band will quickly get fed up if you spend half of rehearsal troubleshooting Ableton Live or your in-ear monitoring. Second, you need to cast a vision for them to see how much it will improve the sound and make them overall better musicians. Tell them all professional worship groups like Hillsong and Tomlin use a click and tracks. You are less professional without them. Third, tell them that using Ableton will give you the ability to automate lighting and lyrics, making your worship services more excellent and decreasing distractions during worship. Number 11, can it work for other media programs? Yes, it can work with other presentation software and lighting software that receive MIDI commands. It does not work with all media programs. My expertise is automating ProPresenter for lyrics and my DMX 3.0 for lighting. If you want to make the most of my training on Ableton automation, I would recommend those programs, which are great for any church context. Number 12, what is the equipment I need to get started? You need a 3.5mm TRS to dual 1/4-inch cable to plug your laptop running Ableton into a stereo DI box, which then goes into your sound console. Make sure your console has 2 available channels for a click track and your backing tracks. You also need in-ear monitors for your click track. I have a much more extensive article on the gear you will need on my blog. I'll link that article below. Number 13, what do I do with volunteers if they are not running lights and slides? Be creative and find other ways for them to contribute to your church's worship ministry. I would recommend having someone still be present around your production gear to look over the lights and ProPresenter in case of a malfunction. They could have more of a service producer role, meaning they make sure other elements of the service are flowing smoothly and everybody's communicating together the proper way. Number 14, how do you organize content in Ableton? I store all of my Ableton media on an external hard drive. In that hard drive, I have a master folder called Ableton, and inside that folder, I have a folder for every individual song session. I have another folder labeled Sunday Set List, and that contains all the set lists I've assembled for weekend worship. My training gets much more in-depth, but in a nutshell, find what works for you and stick with it. I started building my library 3 years ago, and I'm so glad I went with my current system of organization. Number 15, how do I get started with Ableton Live? Download my free guide, the Lead Worship with Ableton Toolkit. The first step to getting started with Ableton Live is making sure you have all the right gear and software in place. This guide will show you what you need to use Ableton for running a click and tracks, as well as automating your lyrics and lighting. It also includes detailed pricing and convenient links for purchasing the tools online. Click the link in the description of this video, complete that form, and I'll send you instant access to the toolkit. I hope this video answered most of your questions about Ableton Live for worship, but if you still have questions, please let me know below in the comments and I'll do my best to reply as soon as possible. Subscribe to the Churchfront channel, share this video with your other friends in ministry who are interested in learning about Ableton Live for worship, and if you found this video helpful, please hit that like button.